Chapter 1. Keepers in the Fog. The Ozark Mountains are not kind to the inattentive. Their ridges twist into secrets, the rivers lose their names after each rain, and in Black Hollow, old wisdom says that anything worth remembering must first be hidden. In the autumn of 1892, as fog rolled thick through the timber and strange lights danced across limestone cliffs, a tale began that would split the bone of secrecy at the very heart of these hills. In that year, a handful of families in Black Hollow lived as if shadow was both shelter and weapon. 40 souls, 3 churches, a single rough road, and stories older than the first settlers. To outsiders, the village was backwards, suspicious. Yet every child could recite a list of cave tunnels, every elder could trace a spiral in the dirt, and no one ever spoke above a whisper after sundown. Rumors swirled of invisible societies, guardians of the spiral, vault keepers, even a group calling themselves the Faithful Lost, each dedicated to protecting something beneath the rock. It was said there were codes for entering the vaults and codes for leaving, and if you learned the wrong one, you'd never be seen again. Our story begins with Jacob Morrow, a coal miner turned reluctant explorer, whose family's misfortune led him into forbidden caves rarely spoken of even in closest prayer. Jacob's brother Elijah had vanished the previous spring. His only trace, a spiral scratched onto a piece of shale, and a list of strange numbers nobody could solve. Jacob was haunted by the idea that someone, or something, was testing whether his family truly belonged to the mountain's memory. Jacob's search began, not in bravery, but agitation. He haunted the edges of church suppers, listening to the slips in conversation, to the coded warnings disguised as weather complaints. In Black Hollow, when a man said, "The moss is growing on the wrong side this year," it could mean rain, or it could mean strangers. Sometimes it meant none of those things and everything else. At twilight, Jacob passed the grave markers on his family's plot, each name softened by wind and time. His mother's, Marianne, was the last fresh one. She died murmuring about keys and coins, pressing a strip of bark into his palm with a spiral scratched deep at its center. She'd whispered, "Don't trust the easy stories, Jacob." The bark smelled of soil and the faintest trace of gunpowder. Night after night, he would walk the line where forest collapsed into the old quarry, pausing at a fallen sycamore that locals called the Widow's Arm. Once he heard a dry laugh ripple through the branches and didn't run. The next morning, beneath the tree, he found a tiny wooden domino and a yellowed strip of newspaper pocked with faded writing. Vault was opened on a night like this. Price was not gold, but name and memory. Jacob pored over Elijah's things: pocket watch, empty matchbox, a notebook filled with numbers that wound around sketches of spirals and dead-end tunnels. With each new clue, the lines between riddle and prophecy blurred. And the more he searched, the more the elders in Black Hollow began to watch him in silence. One evening, a knock on Jacob's door changed everything. On the porch stood Lavinia Bell, eldest daughter of the town's most secretive family. She held a lantern and a sealed envelope, her knuckles blue from cold or nerves, maybe both. "There's a council meeting tonight," she whispered, eyes scanning the trees. "It's about your brother, and about folk who don't forget what the mountain asks. You'd best come, but say nothing, except what you can swear on silence." Jacob followed Lavinia through winding lanes to the old church on the edge of Black Hollow. The building was little more than a shack of stone and buckled wood, its pews long replaced with heavy chairs, each bearing a spiral carved deep in the armrest. The council had convened only 4 times in the past 50 years, and so when Jacob entered, he felt the hush as a warning. Inside, a dozen faces flickered by lantern light. Elder miners, matriarchs, one man he'd seen only at funerals. Lavinia took her place and handed Jacob the sealed envelope. Inside, he found a scrap of parchment, covered in a spidery map of caves and a single phrase: "He remembers for us when we forget to watch the gate." The chief elder, Mrs. Pike, spoke first, her voice firm and grave as mountain stone. "Elijah went where none of us dared, cracked the spiral at the first vault's heart." The room listened as Jacob explained his brother's clues: the domino, numbers, and the spiral. One old miner whispered, "Names can lock a door, but the wrong name opens what shouldn't be seen." Jacob felt himself filling Elijah's shoes and stepping into a trap. The council argued softly, recalling the last disappearance and the ritual that closed the vaults. Lavinia interrupted, "There is a code in the stone that speaks with voices older than our families. Someone or something is testing Jacob, as it tested Elijah." She turned to Jacob. "You have one chance. Choose your question for the mountain wisely." Jacob bent over the parchment and tried his mother's riddle. "What's the price for opening a vault no one remembers?" Mrs. Pike knelt, picking a spiral-marked ring. "At the gate, the price is memory. In the vault, it is hope. If you walk beyond, you must leave one behind." The elders gave Jacob the map and a copper token, instructing him to walk the first spiral at midnight, alone. He'd have to choose: remember Elijah, or hope for his own survival. As the night deepened, the council dissolved into the fog, leaving Jacob and Lavinia outside. She pressed a domino into his hand. "Don't lose both," she whispered. "The spiral takes as much as it gives." Jacob waited for the stroke of midnight, the copper token warm in his palm, Lavinia's domino almost weightless in his pocket. The moon had slipped behind a veil of cloud, leaving the quarry and woods silent and black. He traced the spiral on the map, finding the hidden entrance at the base of Widow's Arm, a crevice shielded by brambles and a watcher stone bearing 6 marks. He touched the token to each mark, whispering his brother's name. The stone shivered, the ground around it humming like a distant choir. Inside the opening, the spiral path descended, marked with old lantern hooks, and the faint outline of hands pressed centuries before. Jacob felt memory tug and fragment. Faces from childhood flickered beside old fears, every story his mother told now echoing with warnings. The corridors pressed tighter, and the air was alive with questions. Would you trade truth for a name? Would you claim another's hope to save your own? Jacob answered in whispers, remembering every story passed down in Black Hollow, even the ones meant only for nights of dread. When he reached the vault door, the spiral at its heart pulsed blue, and the stone split open to reveal a chamber lined with dominoes, each inscribed with a name. A voice, neither echo nor hallucination, but clear and deep like bedrock, spoke. Welcome, Morrow. The spiral will keep what you choose and leave what you regret. Name your cost. Jacob faced an impossible choice. Remember Elijah and risk all hope, or carve a new future and become a stranger to his own past. As the vault's spiral spun, memories and inventions collided. In the chamber, Jacob saw faded faces and shadow stories, lost miners, secret keepers, even his mother, her eyes blazing with resolve. He laid his copper token on the central spiral, and suddenly, The domino in his pocket began to hum. Jacob spoke. His story, his fear, his deepest hope. The vault shuddered, the mountain listened, and as dawn crept across the hollow, the answer began to reveal itself. Jacob's voice echoed through the vault, carried by the spiral that set every domino humming with subtle energy. The names on the walls flickered. Some glowed faintly, some faded in and out. Others pulsed with a light Jacob felt in his bones. His choices hung in the charged darkness. Memory, hope, the weight of longing and regret. He set his story in the center, speaking as much to the mountain as to himself. I remember Elijah, the path, the secrets, the price he paid for trying. And I hope that by entering tonight, I won't just find answers, but free all those who never made it back. The vault answered first, with wind, rushing through cracks and recent carvings, shaking dust from the old dominoes and swirling the blue spiral in the floor. Then it answered with images. Elijah standing at the same spiral, tears streaming as shadowy hands reached from the walls. A young Lavinia, digging codes into wet clay. Faces from Jacob's childhood, some smiling, some mouthing warnings he didn't understand. Jacob's copper token glimmered, then sank down into the central spiral. The air thickened, pressing memories harder, a torrent of voices crowding his thoughts. He paid. Will you lose? Will you choose what's left for the living? With a trembling hand, Jacob gripped the humming domino. He spoke again. If you take a memory, let hope remain. If you steal hope, leave me the name of everyone lost. The vault rumbled. Dominoes cracked and spun, the spiral splitting open, and the chamber burst into flickering scenes. Elijah emerging in sunlight from a different cave, haunted but alive, but never able to speak of what he'd seen. Lavinia placing her domino on a family gravestone, closing a wound but opening a path for others. Black Hollow itself, braving new losses, inventing ever more riddles and stories to keep the spiral fed and the vault locked for another generation. Jacob staggered from the vault as dawn painted pale gold across the valley. He'd lost some memories. His mother's secret song, the exact shade of Elijah's laughter, but found new hope, an inner resolve to search not for closure, but for the spiral's next secret. Lavinia was waiting, eyes bright with mourning and possibility. Together they watched the vault's entrance seal behind them, the spiral shimmer fading into moss and stone. The mountain kept its bargains, always hungry, but for now, willing to let the living invent tomorrow's answers. Jacob and Lavinia walked together through Black Hollow's waking streets. Sunlight revealed subtle changes, a sense of pause in every greeting, the old women watching the shadows with renewed suspicion, young children poking at mossy stones for clues to long-lost riddles. At breakfast, Jacob noticed his father's eyes, sadder, but somehow focused, as if he too remembered something newly lost or newly found. Jacob recounted what he could, the spirals, the voices, the price paid in memory. But no matter how he spoke, pieces slipped through like water. One verse from a childhood song, the date of his mother's wedding. Yet hope burned clearer. He felt it in the way Lavinia smiled, in the council's new resolve. Word spread that Jacob had entered the vault and returned. Black Hollow was changed, not saved, not condemned, but unsettled and alive. The council called another meeting at the old church, this time opening the doors to everyone. Elders debated what must be remembered and what should be invented anew. So the mountain could not claim too many at once. Jacob placed his map beside Elijah's notebook. opening them to the town's youth. "Every spiral has a path," he said, "but the hardest thing is learning which story belongs to the living." Lavinia brought out the council's copper ring and placed it in the sunlight. "We're not just keepers of the spiral," she told the crowd. "We're makers of new hope and guardians of each other's secrets." Families drew spirals in the dust, sang lopsided songs, and pressed their own dominoes into the cracks of Black Hollow's gates, a promise to remember, a challenge to invent, and a prayer to whatever forces watched the valleys from beneath the rocks. As dusk fell once more, Jacob knew his journey was far from finished. For every answer the vault had given, 1,000 new mysteries lay waiting. But he also knew, with Lavinia and the council at his side, he would face whatever the spiral demanded, and the legend of the Ozarks would never be the same again. Chapter 2. The First Vault, War. 1. Whispers of Borders. Spring arrived in Black Hollow more as a rumor than a promise. The forest gave up its snows in sudden cracks, and the riverbanks glistened with spirals stamped in muddy clay, signs that the mountain was stirring. Jacob and Lavinia watched as elders and newcomers alike grumbled at the shifting wind, eyes narrowing at distant flickers among the trees. Stories of the spiral were no longer mere family secret. They leaked from porch to prayer circle, market to mine. Whisper networks gathered, fueled by fears of vaults almost breached and keepers too bold. Lavinia tracked coded gossip, catching hints of the faithful lost plotting a new descent. 2. The Keeper's Council. The council reassembled at dusk, not in the old church but at Widow's Arm, joined by miners, mothers, and the outcast preacher Gray. Jacob laid the spiral map in Elijah's notebook before them. The elders debated whether to strengthen the old rules or risk collapse and reinvention. A heated vote split the group. Mrs. Pike led for tradition, close the vault forever, and burn the spiral stones. Gray and Lavinia called for a keeper's war. If our ancestors built gates, let us decide who holds the key. Jacob felt the weight of every vanished family member and the tension of new betrayals. He pledged his fate to Lavinia's cause. The war for the vaults, silent, secret, and perilous, had begun. 3. Codemakers and betrayals. Secret societies blossomed in moonlit fields, each plotting their own entry to the vault. Young miners swapped coded dominoes. Lavinia's rival, Seth Bell, traded family secrets for spiraled coins. Children listened at doors, then rewrote elders' stories in riddles and songs. The faithful lost staged a raid, stealing key artifacts, planting false clues, and even blackmailing council members. Jacob and Lavinia raced to intercept them, following a trail of cracked dominoes and cryptic chalk spirals to the high ridge caves, where the first battle of wit, memory, and courage changed the valley's fate. 4. Rituals and sacrifices. The war brought pain, families divided, code rituals reshaped. Every midnight saw candles guttered, names whispered to the stone, and copper tokens passed in secrecy. Jacob and Lavinia uncovered forbidden runes, half prayer, half curse, meant to open the vault and untangle its traps. Jacob suffered visions, faces trapped in stone, his mother's song pitched to strange frequencies, the spiral's heart glowing with a warning he could not decipher. Lavinia's own secrets, lost siblings, a broken oath, rippled through their partnership, but drew them closer to the truth. 5. The Night of the Broken Spiral. On the eve of the vault's final defense, war erupted. Elders and faithful lost clashed in the outer tunnels, flashlights waving like ghosts. Dominoes shattered as codes failed and old alliances dissolved. Jacob faced Seth Bell, who revealed the price for power. One keeper must vanish so the spiral could spare the others. Lavinia risked everything, invoking the oldest ritual. Trade hope for memory and war for peace, but let the name survive. Jacob saw her shimmer, the spiral's glow passing through her hands, as if she were both sacrificed and saved. 6. Aftermath and inheritance. At dawn, the vault's door groaned shut. Those who survived counted losses, hope, memory, names forgotten or reforged, but also a new future. Elders wept as newly written codes passed into the children's hands, and even the faithful lost, battered but defiant, took their place in the spiral's next chapter. Jacob and Lavinia stood at the boundary of night and morning, gazing at sealed stones. "We are keepers now," Jacob whispered, "and our story is the vault's inheritance." 7. The prophecy. Stirs. The mountain's next prophecy roared in the distance, rumblings beneath the caves, shimmering blue dust at every crossroads. As Black Hollow rebuilt, new challenges swirled, rival archives, the threat of outside explorers, and the spiral's promise that every war is just the beginning. Jacob began a new notebook, filled less with codes and more with questions, each a seed for another spiral, another generation, another legend. Here's a vivid, expanded segment to make the second chapter richer and more intense, detailing the first clashes, personal stakes, and the psychological dread haunting the war over the spiral vault. As tension mounted, Black Hollow was no longer a settlement. It became a battlefield of memory and invention. Lavinia rose daily before the mist lifted, tracing new codes in fresh clay and burying tokens beneath the roots of Widow's arm. Jacob joined her, every step across dew and shadow reminding him of the price already paid. The faithful lost, struck with cunning. One night they scattered dominoes etched with false spirals at every doorstep, sowing doubt and panic. Whole families awoke to find secret messages burned onto doors. "You hold what the mountain wants, return it, and your name survives the winter." Children lost their ability to sleep without reciting family stories in coded sequence. At council, old rivalries flared. Mrs. Pike accused Gray of trading their safety for a glimpse of forbidden knowledge. The outcast preacher, tormented by visions, claimed, "The spiral isn't a cage, it's a question. Ignore it, and we lose ourselves. Answer it, and perhaps lose even more." Jacob spent nights at the vault entrance, feeling the pressure grow. He saw coded lanterns flickering through the fog, signs of alliances forming and breaking with each hour. Lavinia's brother became entangled, caught trying to steal an artifact, forced to admit he owed debts to those who'd vanished. One evening, Jacob was summoned to the high ridge by Seth Bell. There, by the ruins of a spiral stone altar, Seth confessed the truth of his own betrayal. "I'm not here for power, Jacob. My mother was lost years back. Vault silence, nothing left but a broken domino and an echo in her old church seat. I nearly gave up." Jacob looked into the dark, the spiral cut in red across Seth's palm. "What do you want now?" "I want to see what's inside before it takes another. I'll help you. If you swear, you'll let me forget when it's done." Together, they plotted a last descent, racing Lavinia and her band into the lower vault. Below, they encountered twisted passageways, coded doors, traps left by previous wars, whispered rituals at every bend, passwords sung, names bartered, hope poured out in offerings to stone. Jacob glimpsed traces of Elijah, a phrase, a sketch, the arc of a spiral in old clay. Lavinia risked her life decoding a wall of runes, nearly collapsing as memories of her lost siblings overwhelmed her. At the chapter's apex, after a night spent battling shadows and the mountain's relentless hunger, Jacob recognized the true war wasn't just for the spiral. It was for the souls of Black Hollow. The vault's keeper appeared in a blaze of blue, his eyes full of every secret kept, every hope traded away. "You fight because you fear what comes next," the keeper said. "You are not for memory, but so that invention has space to thrive." Jacob felt the burden shift. He and Lavinia reached for the copper ring together, forging a pact. "We accept loss, share hope, and promise to name every secret, true or invented, with all who follow." Black Hollow quieted as the spiral accepted their offering. War ended, not neatly, not without loss, but with the promise of new stories and new beginnings awaiting in the depths. With the war's end, silence settled over Black Hollow, like a heavy mist. Jacob, Lavinia, and Seth gathered the survivors in the council barn, faces lit by spiral-shaped lanterns. No one spoke at first. Grief for lost names and hope for hard-won peace were twin weights in every chest. Families sent out their oldest children in pairs, each carrying a story, a domino, and a spiral token. Their task? Walk the borders of the settlement and call back any echo, real or imagined. On the third night, one pair returned with a carved bone, an old keeper's signature etched deep, proof that not all secrets die even after battle. Lavinia initiated a reconciliation ritual. By the stone altar on Widow's Arm, she led the townsfolk in a new spiral dance. Each person shared a secret, true or false, casting tokens into a lantern that flickered blue, purple, and gold. Gray offered one of his own coded prayers. "Let this spiral hold our fears and forgive our betrayals. Let our games, even the cruelest, teach us who we are." Jacob stood beside Lavinia as Seth unfurled Elijah's old notebook. Together, they recorded every story told, losses, theft, betrayals, and tiny victories. What the spiral war had taught: a keeper's duty is not to hide or hoard, but to share and remember, even if the truth becomes legend in retelling. The mountain rumbled approval. The vault stayed shut, for now. And in the hush, even old rivals felt the possibility of new beginnings. Children invented games, secret handshakes, and code words to protect each other from future wars, knowing what the price could be. Chapter 3. Vaults of Sorrow, Roads of Fire. The year after the war, Black Hollow wore its scars openly. The vault remained sealed, but the mountain breathed danger in every mist and echoed in every new riddle that children sang. For most, daily life resumed, a rhythm of fieldwork, repairs, hushed prayers, and secret games. But beneath the comfort of routine, new threats and hungers circled, waiting to be named. Jacob dreamed in spirals, of Elijah calling from within the stone, of copper tokens burning through his palms, of Lavinia running through tunnels as the keeper's voice thundered behind her. Waking, he found these dreams, left behind blue dust on his pillow, and a new fear in his heart. The past was no longer content to sleep. The spiral was moving again. 1. A new arrival. One cold morning, a stranger arrived in Black Hollow. He wore city boots, old cavalry patches, and spoke with a drawl that tried to sound local, but always missed. He introduced himself as Mr. Hilton Fairbanks, a scholar of the folkloric arts. He'd heard whispers about the spiral and the vault, and wanted to record the true story, before it was lost in the fog of memory. Jacob, now a reluctant leader, watched the townsfolk's reaction, some enthralled, some enraged. Fairbanks offered silver coins for stories. That night, legends and lies twined like smoke at the tavern. Seth Bell sold him sketches of the spiral's altar and a so-called map of the vanished. Lavinia discouraged everyone from saying too much. A story told too far from its root grows thorns, she warned. 2. Echoes and divisions. Fairbanks's presence stoked old rivalries. Mrs. Pike insisted no outsider could understand the war's cost. Gray, nursing bitterness from his exile, started gathering a faction of his own, the Defiant. Quietly, these new dissenters met in the high woods and plotted to unseal the vault, dreaming of gold, revenge, or even an end to the spiral's grip. Jacob and Lavinia debated. Should they share Black Hollow's mystery and rely on the scholar's goodwill, or shut him out and hope secrecy still held power? Meanwhile, strange things began. Dominoes left on pews with ominous riddles, children's chalk spirals found on grave markers, a river so blue it glowed at midnight. Those who'd fought in the Vault War felt their memories fray, inventing details that could not have been true. 3. Keeper's Oath broken. During the summer festival, a tradition meant to bring healing and unity, chaos erupted. The Defiant staged a public reading of an ancient vault prophecy, reciting forbidden names. A sudden wind toppled the spiral altar, scattering copper tokens and breaking the night's spell. Seth Bell, caught between both sides, confessed before all. I told stories out of turn. Let the vault hear me hope for things I never dared want. Now my dreams are changing me, and I can't remember which secrets are mine. Fear and anger split the town anew. Jacob called a council, but trust was thin, and the old keeper's oaths were broken in spirit, if not in fact. 4. The spiral's price. As autumn thundered in, people began to vanish again. First a young boy, then a teacher who'd mocked the vault, then an old counselor who carried too many secrets. Each time, the missing left behind a spiral-marked item, a scrap of cloth, a half-burnt letter, a cracked domino. Despair turned into suspicion. Fairbanks proposed an expedition to scientifically document the spiral's power. But when a body was found with a copper ring fused to its hand, even he blanched. Lavinia wept at her brother's grave, fearing the keeper's curse was awake once more. 5. The Descent and the Bargain. Driven by guilt and a hunger for answers, Jacob, Lavinia, and a handful of trusted friends prepared a descent into the vault. They brought new tools, stories from other wars, songs and riddles gathered from every family, Fairbanks's tape recorder, against Lavinia's protest. Inside, the spiral was alive, a maze of endless echoes, faces half-remembered swirling in the rock. Other voices answered back. We are the names you forgot, the stories you tried to bury. What will you trade for the next morning's peace? Jacob made the only bargain he could. We'll give up our fear if you let us keep invention. We'll share every story so no echo is ever hungry again. The mountain's answer was thunder and blue fire. Fairbanks's technology went dead, but his written notes glowed with etchings no human hand had made. 6. Reclamation and renewal. The survivors resurfaced after days in the dark, battered but unbroken. With them they carried new legends, stories of ancestors rewritten, vault keepers forgiven, the blue spiral given a new meaning, not just as a threat, but as proof that every wound could become a new tale. The Defiant scattered or repented, Gray wept by the church steps, and even Mrs. Pike admitted the future must hold as many inventions as memories. Children were tasked to invent new stories for every grave. Keepers got tattoos of spirals as vow and ward both. 7. The Last Echo. As winter crept in, Black Hollow's valley shimmered with lanterns. No one pretended the curse was lifted, or the spiral's questions were done. But Jacob, Lavinia, and every survivor now knew. You choose what to keep and what to lose, and in the end, it is stories, not fear, that keep the darkness at bay. And on the darkest night, as snow sifted over the sealed vault, a stranger's echo whispered back from the mountain, "We are listening. Invent wisely." The spiral's awakening changed relationships, not just destinies. Jacob, tormented by doubt, started visiting Mrs. Pike each week, desperate for her knowledge of old codes. "You're not the only one haunted," she confessed. "My father vanished in the vault's first war. The price was always more than memory." She taught Jacob to trace protection runes on his porch, and to never sleep with a domino under his pillow. Meanwhile, Lavinia began collecting stories from the youngest children. Her notebook overflowed with whimsical inventions and secret fears. "The spiral in the river knows my birthday," said one. "Every echo in the church is really my grandfather," said another. She turned these into new rituals: blue lantern walks, spiral dances around graves, lullabies meant to confuse hungry echoes. Fairbanks, the outsider, tried to map every spiral in the valley. He interviewed Gray and Mrs. Pike and attempted to decode the vanishing map Seth had sketched. But his manuscript became corrupted. Strange symbols would rearrange in the moonlight, and his field recorder replayed answers from interviews never held. He wrote, "This place is rewriting me as much as I try to rewrite it." One evening, Lavinia led a midnight procession into the heart of the old mine. The children sang invented verses, elders recited names. Jacob and Fairbanks followed at distance, hearing whispers in the rock. "The vault is hungry, but so are we. Tell us an ending, and you may choose a dawn." There, deep underground, Lavinia invoked the new keeper's oath. "We promise to invent every story twice, once for memory and once for hope. If we are lost, let us be found by what we share and not by what we fear." Blue fire flickered from the spiral altar. Suddenly, the echoes shifted. Instead of threats, the mountain offered choices. Jacob had to answer riddles posed by apparition memories, some his mother's, some Elijah's, some belonging to the lost counselors who'd vanished decades before. Jacob chose wisely, sacrificing one childhood secret for Lavinia's promise that no child would ever be forgotten again. The vault shuddered, then released a heavy silver ring marked with the names of every survivor from the spiral wars. After this, Black Hollow became a place defined by invention, not just tradition. Mrs. Pike led a night where every elder confessed their forgotten sin and let it be retold as legend, healed by laughter and forgiveness. Fairbanks left, his maps unfinished, but his heart full of new light. Seth Bell and Gray hosted domino tournaments, inventing rules that changed with every echo. Children recited spiral poems at crossroads, believing their words would keep the mountains silent another year. And on the edge of the valley, Jacob dug a new vault, empty except for one copper token. He whispered, "Let whoever finds this be kinder than the spiral, and wiser than what we regret." The third chapter closed with lanterns swinging in the wind, echoes of every name, not just the lost, but the new, the hopeful, and the brave, singing out toward dawn. Chapter 4. The Prophecy of the Shattered Spiral. Black Hollow survived its spiral wars, but it could not escape prophecy. The mountain whispered warnings in every wind, carrying rumors of a curse older than memory and deeper than any vault. The prophecy of the shattered spiral. Its promise. Before peace comes, every secret must surface, every hope must be tested. Jacob awoke with dreams no longer his own. The mountain spoke in riddles, showing him images of a spiral fractured by strangers, an unstoppable storm blowing copper tokens into the farthest valleys. Lavinia found her notebook erased. Stories she penned the night before had turned to cryptic messages about missing daughters and candles too stubborn to die. Mrs. Pike claimed her father's voice called from the river at sunset, urging her to prepare for the reckoning. 1. The Omen Festival. A rare festival was called, held at the river, every spiral keeper present. Elders burned blue lanterns and passed the silver survivor ring, reciting every generation's curse and promise. Jacob led the opening. The mountain gave us memory and hope. We accept what we forgot. Tonight we invent the rest. At midnight, a storm hit. Dominoes scattered. The youngest children, led by Gray, found new codes etched into the roots of Widow's arm. Lavinia saw a vision. 3 gates, only one safe, each one guarded by echoing voices who claimed to know every lie the town had ever told. 2. The Unraveling. As the rain continued, boundaries in Black Hollow unraveled. Rivers overflowed with blue dust. Old spiral stones began to crack. Families fought, some pushed for tradition, others for radical invention. Fairbanks returned, this time with 2 cryptologists who claimed, "The shattered spiral is a cipher, not a curse. Solve it, and the vaults open freely." Jacob joined a midnight search for the gates. Lavinia tracked her missing stories through tunnel echoes. Children admitted to seeing familiar faces appear and vanish in fog, each one whispering secrets about the council's first oath-breaking. 3. Judgment Night. On the eve of Judgment Night, Black Hollow held its breath. A ritual at the spiral altar drew every keeper and every rival. Mrs. Pike brought the original copper ring. Seth Bell confessed he'd heard his mother's voice call him across the river, promising safety if he only betrayed what the spiral demanded. Jacob faced trial. Elders demanded he choose. Will you remember the mountain, or hope for a future outside its shadow? He answered with a story, half memory, half invention, about Elijah's first descent and the forgiveness won by risking his own fate. Lightning struck the spiral altar, burning away every old code and opening the vault's true riddle. Echoes merged, faces flickered with pain and relief, and suddenly the mountain was calm again, at least for one night. 4. The Price for Peace. The aftermath was not gentle. Keepers recounted losses. Some could no longer recall loved ones. Some found themselves gifted with invented histories. Lavinia held a spiral child in her arms, swearing she'd name every secret for all who survived. Gray and Fairbanks decoded the mountain's last prophecy. The spiral will break, but every keeper's tale will become the valley's shield. A new artifact was discovered. A bone token marked with both code and memory. Proof the heaviest price was worth paying. Jacob and Mrs. Pike led a final spiral walk, each keeper offering a hope for the future. Together, they refounded the council. New rules, new stories, new oaths sworn by lantern light. The coming dawn. As dawn broke, Black Hollow shook off the storm. Children played dominoes in fields where wildflowers mapped new spirals. Elders sang at the riverside, inventing new verses to old prayers. Lavinia found her stories again. They'd returned as visions, rewritten but bright. Jacob knew the spiral was never just a curse, it was an invitation. Every secret shared fed the valley. Every lie forgiven, let the mountain sleep a little longer. 6. The spiral's watchers. On the edge of town, a group of strangers watched. Some were rivals who'd survived the prophecy. Others were drawn by news and radio. Fairbanks published a manuscript warning, "No spiral stays buried. The price for peace is always paid in memory and myth." Jacob walked the borders with Lavinia, placing new tokens at crossroads and gateposts. Black Hollow would never be the same, but it would not be forgotten. 7. The shattered spiral remade. And so the chapter closed with hope. The spiral once feared now saw a new dawn. Every wound stitched with inventions, every curse undone by a promise to remember and forgive. And as the valley flourished, the mountain waited for tomorrow's prophecy, knowing this time Black Hollow would meet whatever danger came, together. The morning after the festival, Black Hollow awakened to uncertain silence. Blue dust still clung to fences, and the river glowed faintly with the memory of storm. Jacob walked the ridge, noticing spiral stones split cleanly down the center, as if the valley itself had inhaled and fractured overnight. Mrs. Pike gathered all the elders in the barn, demanding each recite their family's oldest oath. "No keeper survives alone," she declared. "Tonight, the mountain decides who will be tested." Families exchanged stories in whispers, some true, some invented, each word a fragile shield against the shattered spiral's call. Gray, restless from visions, led a midnight procession to the high woods. There he spoke aloud the mountain's newest riddle. "When memory is the only treasure, how do you spend it wisely?" Children marked the crossroads with spiral glyphs of their own design, believing new signs might confuse old spirits. Lavinia gathered the youngest survivors and instructed them to invent a future each could tell, a story so wild that even mountain echoes might lose their grip. As days passed, outsiders arrived again, scavengers, seekers, even a cryptic woman named Mercy, who carried a suitcase full of dominoes and claimed to be kin to Seth Bell's lost mother. She'd come, she said, to reclaim the prophecy before the spiral takes root in new soil. Jacob, burdened by dreams and duty, met Mercy at the river's edge. She pressed a bone token into his hand, cold as dusk, and etched with a spiraling script he almost recognized. "We must either forgive the mountain," Mercy whispered, "or find a way to teach the spirits that compassion survives every curse." Meanwhile, Lavinia's notebook filled with new codes. She taught spiral dances at dusk, became the valley's unofficial historian, not of what happened, but of everything that could happen if hope outlasted memory. "Invent wisely," she told every child, "and never let the same story protect you twice." The town's nights grew stranger. Lanterns flickered with blue and gold fire. Elders dreamed of lost spirals, hearing laughter in the rocks. Jacob wandered the vault's perimeter, unsure whether he was protecting the future or escorting the past to its final reckoning. Mrs. Pike assembled one last spiral altar ceremony. Townsfolk came bearing tokens, shards of memory, scraps of letters, invented names to give to the mountain. Gray recited the valley's oldest prayer, and Jacob placed Mercy's bone token at the center, promising, "We accept what we forgot. We heal what we can. And if the spiral shatters, let our next story rebuild us wiser." As dawn crept through the mists, Black Hollow felt changed, not relieved, not damned, but readied. The prophecy of the shattered spiral was not just survived, but remade. Every wound now open for healing, every lie forgiven in the light. And the valley waited once more, knowing that even as the spiral cracked, hope could spiral outward, bluer, braver, and more beautiful than any curse the mountain dared to keep. The next days brought more than omens, they brought decisions. Jacob, restless from nightly visions, gathered the council, elders, children, newcomers, under the fractured lanterns of Mercy's blue-lit barn. If the mountain demands the truth, let us not fear what invention can heal, he declared. Mrs. Pike led a round of spiral prayers at dusk, insisting each secret must be confessed and then retold as a hopeful myth. Some shared regrets, years of hidden feuds, lost loves, bargains made in fear. Others invented legends for the future, tales of rivers running clear and the spiral never splitting again. Mercy, mysterious as ever, claimed to see faces in every shadow. Names are only true as the kindness that remembers them, she whispered, gifting dominoes to orphaned children and reciting poetry where curses once settled. Gray grew bolder, hosting nightly gatherings behind the high woods. He spoke of new signs, spiral glyphs melting into wildflowers, songs sung backwards that kept echoes at bay. He taught children to borrow stories from strangers, blending invention and memory until neither could be lost to the valley's curse. Meanwhile, Lavinia composed a new spiral code, etching it into the stone altar left by the storm. She and Jacob led the spiral vigil, a ritual where every villager walked the crossroads, reciting their greatest hope and laying a token for the mountain to keep or return. One rain-heavy night, a young girl named Ruth brought the final riddle to the circle. If the spiral breaks and we forget everything, who will be left to invent tomorrow's dawn? No one answered, but the mountain rang with laughter for the first time in years. In the aftermath, Jacob found Mercy standing alone at the vault. She pressed a bone token into his palm once more. Give this away if you ever fear the spiral's hunger returning. Gifts, secrets, forgiveness, all are just ways to begin again. Jacob nodded, feeling the weight and promise of every spiral keeper before him. I will remember, and I will invent. Whatever the valley needs, we will give. As the chapter closed, Black Hollow glowed with hundreds of lanterns, each one a story, a shield, a promise. The shattered spiral's prophecy was no longer a threat, but a challenge. To heal without forgetting. To invent without fleeing. To choose hope in every echo of the mountain's song. Chapter 5. The Night of 100 Echoes. The valley awoke to a new era. Spirals marked in every path, secrets swirling as freely as the morning fog. But even as Black Hollow found new hope, the mountain hinted at a final reckoning. The Night of 100 Echoes. The prophecy spread through waking dreams, warning that every forgotten tale, every invented grace, would be tested at once. Jacob no longer dreamed alone. Lavinia felt the spiral tracing new codes behind her eyes. Mrs. Pike started speaking in riddles from her sleep. And even the children invented new names for the rivers, so no spirit could ever catch their true reflection. Mercy, carrying her dominoes and bone tokens, whispered to the mountain every dawn, "Let our kindness outlast our fear." 1. Gathering at dusk. The council summoned all, elders, children, outsiders, even the defiant, calling a spiral watch at the old altar. Lanterns were strung down every fence. Blue fire burned higher than any festival before. Jacob led old rituals, inviting every rival to confess, every friend to forgive. Lavinia taught a new spiral song, blending memory with myth, turning every loss into a promise. Mercy arrived with a suitcase packed with stories. She spoke aloud the spiral's latest rules. Tonight, every echo will be named and welcomed. Kindness is the shield. Invention, the key. 2. The test of invention. As dusk deepened, the spiral altar shimmered with blue and gold light. Each keeper was challenged to invent a story for someone they'd lost, and to forgive someone they'd once tried to forget. The mountain's echoes watched, whispering counter-rituals at the dark edges of the field. Jacob was tested by apparitions, his mother Elijah, Mrs. Pike's vanished father. They spoke both in laughter and in sorrow, pushing him to trade a memory for a new dawn. Lavinia risked more, offering 5 stories she'd always told in secret. Every child danced in circles, calling out, "Invent, remember, repair," until their voices resonated against the vault's closed stone. The 100 echoes reveal. At midnight, fog thickened, swallowing the lanterns. Each echo called out, lost voices, betrayed allies, children never returned, keepers long vanished. The council recited the spiral prayer backwards. Mercy cast bone tokens at every crossroads. Jacob faced his final challenge, a vision of every error, fracture, and loss that the mountain held. He was asked, would you give up invention for the safety of memory, or risk memory for the hope of invention? He chose hope. Lavinia followed, inventing a story so wild that the echoes retreated, unable to shape or swallow it. 4. The aftermath of forgiveness. The next morning, Black Hollow was changed. Most found some memory missing, replaced by a feeling of new strength. Children invented a tale of the 100 echoes, how kindness had chosen every survivor in the night. Rivals wept and embraced. Mrs. Pike rewrote her family's oath in song. The spiral altar rebuilt as a mosaic of every tale, old and new. Mercy gifted her last domino to Jacob, saying, keep inventing, even if memory fails. The mountain only listens to those who dare hope for repair. 5. Rituals of renewal. All winter, Black Hollow forged new rituals. A festival at every full moon, lanterns marking failures as proof of new beginnings, spiral dances sung by river and field. Jacob, Lavinia, and the council became not just keepers, but authors, teaching future generations to risk invention as freely as they risked remembering. Elders gathered to heal their oldest wounds, and the valley was built again, from echo to echo, from hope to hope. Prophecy's gift. The spiral's prophecy faded out as dawn warmed the fields. No curse, no fear, only the legacy of a memory remade and a kindness multiplied. Children named every new path. Elders taught that invention was not escape, but a gift. Every lantern, every domino, every story was both shield and key for generations to come. 7. Spiral unbroken. And as winter thawed, the mountain was quiet, listening but never hungry. Jacob knew the valley was ready. The 100 echoes could come again, but now Black Hollow would meet them not with terror, but with invention and the courage to forgive. Here is an ultra-engaging continuation and expansion of Chapter 5, layering more psychological suspense, folklore, and mythic emotion as Black Hollow faces the night of 100 echoes. The days following the spiral watch felt charged, as if every word spoken might become prophecy. Jacob struggled with the aftermath, memories reshaping into inventions, some nights haunted by glimpses of Elijah beside Mercy, some full of joyous laughter from children inventing games only the spiral could comprehend. Lavinia took to recording these moments. Her notebook grew dense with riddles and sketches, each page a shield against forgetting. She led the children on dusk walks, asking them to invent new spiral symbols for every hope and fear. One evening, a young boy named Samuel dreamed of a blue spiral growing from his hand. The town, listening, invented a story that this meant luck and protection would hold for another year. Mrs. Pike, now revered for surviving so many spiral prophecies, drafted a new keeper's oath. If we lose, we will forgive. If we win, we invent anew. Let memory soften, and let hope blaze. Mercy began visiting the outlying farms at sunrise, gifting her bone tokens and crafted dominoes to anyone struggling with grief or doubt. Her presence became a folk legend. Children believed she could whisper a curse back into a blessing. If only you let her recite your true name beneath a lantern's glow. Gray, emboldened, organized the 100 Echoes competition. Families took turns retelling their oldest wounds, their wildest desires, and the most cherished secret. The spiral altar was filled with copper rings, dominoes painted anew, and offerings of handmade spiral art. For one night, the valley was awash in invention and song, echoing off the mountains as if the very rocks might turn to listen. Jacob stood at the edge of the festival, recalling his journey in the vault and the price he paid for hope. He welcomed Fairbanks, who, humbled, pledged to chronicle the Echo Night with honesty and reverence, not just curiosity. By dawn, Black Hollow felt stitched together by story and ritual, a tapestry of forgiveness and fantasy. Lanterns burned bright until the last echo vanished, leaving behind a valley gentler, braver, and united. Jacob pressed the final domino into the spiral altar, whispering, "We are not what the mountain takes. We are every name invented, every secret forgiven, every dawn earned." And as the new day crested the ridges, the night of 100 Echoes faded into legend. The spiral remained unbroken, but with every turn, Black Hollow had learned. To hope is to invent, to survive is to forgive, and to tell a new story is to reclaim tomorrow. The thaw after the 100 Echoes brought powerful changes. Black Hollow's valley, newly sung and storied, opened itself to travelers and secrets long buried. Jacob and Lavinia found themselves at the heart of a new council, a patchwork of keepers, healers, and inventors who pledged to guard the spiral not with fear, but with shared hope. Mercy, the domino keeper, began teaching her story crafting to every child who'd lost someone in the spiral wars. She painted bone tokens with wild blazes of blue and gold, gifting them at crossroads alongside riddles and gentle instructions for forgiving old wounds. She whispered, "If you ever wish to invent a future, start by inventing a kindness." Gray arranged for the valley's first spiral pilgrimage. Families and newcomers journeyed together through the fields, rivers, and ridges, retelling old tales, swapping tokens, and creating a living mosaic at the spiral altar. Seth Bell placed his late mother's bone ring upon it, and in the shimmering lantern light, Jacob promised that every loss would be mourned and every hope honored. As weeks passed, new mysteries grew. Blue dust patterns appeared outside the mines. Fairbanks reported strange echoes in his manuscript, words rewriting themselves overnight. Lavinia realized the spiral was evolving, less a curse, and more a challenge to rewrite history with as much bravery as sorrow. One night, the valley gathered for the spiral vigil. Hundreds circled the mosaic altar, each reciting a name or a legend, each forgiving someone else under the stars. Jacob led the final spiral, his voice trembling but steadfast. declaring Black Hollow's pact. We invent the future. We keep every memory as flame and shield. If the spiral returns, it will find us kinder, stronger, ready. As dawn broke, children played echo games in the new meadow, inventing rivals and salvation out of thin air. Lavinia wrote the valley's first spiral fable for the next generation. If you find yourself lost, follow the lanterns. If you meet an echo, forgive it. If a story invents you, let it, so long as you remember who to invent next. The night of 100 echoes took its toll, but it gave Black Hollow more than survival. It gave the valley a chance to change, to rewrite the curse as a question, and to make kindness the strongest story of all. Chapter 6. The Last Spiral Pact. No legend lasts unless it is renewed. A year after the 100 Echoes, Black Hollow faced a fresh undercurrent of uncertainty. Rumors drifted in with every westward wind of lost valleys reopening, strange signals woven into Fairbanks' radio dispatches, and of a prophecy that the final spiral pact must be sealed, lest the mountain call home every secret ever told. Jacob was older now, his face leaner, his eyes brighter with hope and caution. Lavinia wore her hair in a new braid, blue threads threaded alongside her keeper's ring. Mercy lingered at the crossroads more than ever, dominoes tucked in every pocket and child's hand she found. Even Mrs. Pike, the stalwart sage of the valley, paused at her porch at dusk, listening to the mountain's hush and smiling knowingly. Sometimes she seemed to be speaking with shadows. 1. Midnight messages. New spiral tokens began appearing on windowsills. Copper rings, dominoes painted with fresh symbols, mysterious blue flowers folded around whispered secrets. The children called them midnight messages, believing each held a promise or warning for the finder alone. One message read, "If you wish for hope, pass on what you cannot forget." Jacob gathered the council to decode these gifts. In the firelit barn, each message was examined in turn. "Some are stories left for the lonely," said Gray. "Others are bargains, traps, or blessings. Depends on who remembers." Lavinia spun new codes, asking each child to create their own, blending truth and myth. 2. The Pact Revealed. Mercy revealed the oldest secret from her family's domino. The mountain's final prophecy required sacrifice, not just of memory or hope, but of something each villager cherished most. The spiral altar must be rebuilt with the tokens of what you'd most fear to lose. That night, families debated. Some clung to trinkets, others whispered of old regrets. Jacob offered his mother's song, Lavinia, her secret sketches. Mrs. Pike, her father's ring. Children brought painted feathers, poems, candle stubs, dreams never spoken aloud. The pact night was set at the next blue moon. 3. The Ritual of Safekeeping. As the blue moon rose, every villager circled the spiral altar, laying down their offerings. Gray anointed each with blue dust, reciting, "Once given, never forgotten. Once forgiven, always returned." Lights flickered, echoing shadows twined around the crowd. Mercy sang a song older than any in the valley, its words half forgotten, but its melody strong enough to draw tears and laughter at once. The spiral shimmered, symbols glowing brighter, as each new sacrifice was offered. Some villagers felt memory slip away, only to be replaced by new dreams. Others wept, sensing a final goodbye. At the ritual's height, the mountain rumbled once, then stilled, echoes scattering across the valley, leaving a silence so intense it felt like a beginning. The final test. Dawn found Jacob, Lavinia, and Mercy at the ridge, watching sunrise with tired hope. A faint line of travelers approached. Seekers, exiles, even Fairbanks returned again, manuscript in hand. The pact had shifted something profound. Black Hollow's secrets now bound to kindness, not fear. Travelers were greeted with invented tales, domino games, and invitations to spiral vigils. Jacob handed his last copper token to a young visitor, saying, "Share a story, no matter how wild. The spiral welcomes invention as much as truth." The mountain's silence seemed to hold its breath, testing every new oath. Gifts and farewells. All summer, the valley thrived. New spiral dances were created, children told midnight messages to the wind, and elders finally rested after years of war and prophecy. Mercy whispered to Lavinia, "The pact isn't the end. It's a promise to invent peace, no matter how the story changes." Mrs. Pike planted blue flowers by every gate, singing the spiral's blessing to those who would leave the valley, and to those who might return with new tales to tell. Distant echoes. As the story closed, Jacob reflected. Not every secret could be kept, nor every loss avoided, but as long as invention thrived alongside memory, the spiral would stay unbroken. Black Hollow now belonged to every future legend and every past hope, ready, always, for the next echo, the next wild story, the next forgiveness. As summer waned, the village fell into a gentle rhythm. Festivals, echo games, and storytelling circles carried the spiral's legacy toward autumn. Still, the pact demanded vigilance. Jacob and Lavinia organized keeper patrols. Each night, small bands traced the land, gathering new tokens and noting spiral signs along the creeks and ridges. The blue moon's influence lingered. Wildflowers grew in spiral patterns, children dreamed in riddles, and lost travelers found their way to Mercy's lantern posts with strange tales and gifts of thanks. One afternoon, Mrs. Pike gathered the council for the harvest reckoning. Families brought baskets of spiral-shaped bread, hand-stitched domino quilts, seeds from flower beds planted after vigil. Elders debated which rituals might endure and which secrets should finally be surrendered to the mountain. Gray spoke for the desperate. "Let every sin be sung, so we can forget what does not belong." Lavinia argued for invention. "Some sorrows need new names. Some futures should never look back." Fairbanks documented rights with a gentler eye. No longer the outsider chronicler, but a keeper of memory beside the locals. He interviewed Ruth, who told of inventing a spiral guardian to keep nightmares gentle. Mercy taught bread-baking codes to children, embedding forgiveness into each shared loaf. At the final spiral feast, lanterns shone across the valley from dusk until dawn. Jacob led the spiral procession. At the river, he recited the year's new stories and raised the bone token from Mercy High. Black Hollow's pact will outlast every curse, and every kindness set in bread or song will feed the next legend. As the autumn wind rose, each family lit a lantern for all they hoped to invent, casting blue light along the valley's continuous spiral. The mountain watched, silent and satisfied for now. And as the last echo faded, Jacob, Lavinia, and the children danced their spiral beneath the moon, knowing the lessons of generations had become the valley's shield, its song, and its future. Winter arrived, swirling with new mystery. Black Hollow's lanterns pulsed blue in the frosty dusk, reflecting both on the snow and in the eyes of every villager who had survived the spiral's tests. Jacob and Lavinia often met at the spiral altar, each new snowfall layering their mosaic of tokens thicker, each new night deepening the valley's resolve. Mercy continued to gift bone dominoes along the boundary stones, guiding lost travelers to warmth and forgiveness. Children invented winter echo games, tracking spiral shapes in snowdrifts, retelling the 100 Echoes legend by candlelight, exchanging dominoes for wishes of luck. Fairbanks, now embraced as one of their own, hosted the valley's first Outsiders Vigil. City visitors brought stories, inventions, and curious gifts. One woman presented a music box etched with a spiral, the melody somehow echoing valley lullabies. Elders welcomed the new blood, rewriting their own tales to include strangers as keepers and kin. Mrs. Pike grew restless as the solstice approached. She told Jacob, "The spiral is old, but every winter it asks us, what will we do with the spring?" Together they crafted a new pact for the coming thaw. Every invention must honor the sorrow that birthed it. But every forgiveness must plant a wild hope. A new prophecy was rumored, a shifting shadow in the high woods, the spring spiral that would either crack the valley's shield or heal old wounds completely. Lavinia organized a keeper's council, inviting every child to invent, every elder to confess, and every outsider to weave a new echo into the future. On the night of the final spiral dance, the valley circled the altar in shivering delight. Memory and invention swirled together. Bread was broken, songs were shared, each family making a new promise beneath the stars. Jacob placed a final bone token in the snow and whispered, "Black Hollow will outlast every echo, every war and wound. Spring will come, and with it, hope enough for legends yet unwritten." As the moon set, Mercy's laughter carried down the ridge, children slept peaceful, and the mountains stood quiet, honoring a valley reborn. The first signs of spring arrived as soft blue mist curling around every fence and field. Jacob often wandered the meadow at dawn, watching spiral-shaped shadows melt into wildflowers. Lavinia led children in planting spiral gardens, flower beds mapped with secret hopes and forgiveness, each petal an echo of a legend rewritten. The traders and wanderers returned, their arms full of new stories and gifts. One boy brought a domino carved from driftwood, claiming its riddle could turn anger into laughter. The council reconvened for the Spring Spiral Festival. Elders, keepers, and outsiders gathered at the altar, exchanging lanterns, bread, and tokens, inscribed with the year's new prophecies. Gray sang the Echo Song to guide lost travelers back to safety. Mercy taught lullabies to every toddler born since the pact. Fairbanks read aloud an outsider's legend. In Black Hollow, the spiral never breaks. It spins loss into invention and sorrow into a kindness that echoes forever. Mrs. Pike, frail but proud, knelt beside the altar with Jacob and Lavinia, placing a basket of wild blue flowers at its heart. She spoke, "Our pact has become a shield. Let the valley's story be the world's echo, never feared, always invented." As dusk faded to night, the fireflies danced with the lanterns, tracing silent spirals in the air. Jacob pressed his hand to the altar, feeling every generation's hope vibrating through the stone. Lavinia watched the mountain, sure that the spiral would call again, but never to claim, only to offer a new song. By the spring vigil's end, Black Hollow was ready for any future. Every memory was honored, but every invention was welcomed. Proof that the valley's kindness, tested through curses and war, would endure. And as the festival closed, Mercy whispered to Jacob, "When the spiral returns, let it find us inventing, forgiving, and brave. Jacob nodded, the lantern's blue shadow smearing across his face. We're ready. For every echo and every new legend, the mountain dares to bring. Chapter 7. The Spiral's Return. It began with a sound, a low vibration at dusk, echoing up from beneath the vault and through the deeply rooted woods. For weeks, every spiral token vibrated at the same hour, dominoes humming on windowsills, garden stones seeming to shift in the night. Children awoke, certain they dreamed new riddles. Elders whispered of the spiral's return, a final reckoning and a test not just for Black Hollow, but for the valley's future. Jacob sensed the spiral before he saw it. Blue mist pooling along the roads, Mercy's bone dominoes glowing faintly with heat. Lavinia, her keeper's braid now silvered with time, found new codes in the frost on every pane. Mrs. Pike felt her dreams drawn backward, young and old at once, as if the mountain was calling her to retell every tale she had ever sworn. Warnings and wonders. Night after night, blue lanterns flickered at every crossroads. The council assembled, the old guard, the children grown bold, the latest outsiders folded into family, sharing signs, testing new oaths. Mercy arrived, sleepless, laughing and grave, prophesying, "The spiral does not want what we remember. It wants to see what we'll invent when we truly fear we have nothing left." One morning, the river ran spirals of blue dust for miles. Children found tokens upstream, a domino split by lightning, an ancient copper ring. Jacob gathered the Spiral Society. We will meet the return as we met the war and the echo, with a story no mountain has heard before. 2. The Gathering Storm. A windstorm swept through the valley, fiercer, older than any living memory. Fairbanks, now a keeper of the Spiral's archive, read aloud from new arrivals, letters from forgotten kin, sketches mailed by children who'd left the valley but had never truly left. Each might contain a piece of what the spiral demanded. Elders and children rehearsed spiral dances for protection. Mercy's domino games became more intricate, full of codes within codes. Gray pressed a wildflower spiral into each crossroads, believing every echo needed a guardian. 3. The vault reopens. On the night of the return, the spiral vault cracked open. Jacob and Lavinia entered first, torches in trembling hands, Mercy close behind. Inside they found a new chamber, walls covered in all their inventions, stories etched by every hand that had ever feared or dared to forgive. A voice boomed. The spiral itself. What have you made of pain and hope? What echo will you send into the world? Lavinia recited the story of the valley, from curse to kindness. Mercy danced her dominoes across the floor, painting the chamber in blue and gold. Jacob laid his hand on the spiral's heart, offering memory, invention, and forgiveness, his own and the valley's. 4. The challenge and the gift. The spiral's test was fierce. Riddles no one remembered inventing, scenes from possible futures, faces no child had ever quite forgotten. The mountain craved certainty, but the valley gave ambiguity and laughter. Victorious, the three carried the spiral's heart outside, a single stone, now warm with the imprint of hundreds of hands. The valley gathered, silent, as the mountain awaited a final tale. Jacob spoke. We survived by inventing a future, not by fearing the past. Here is our gift. Every echo, every spiral, every hope yet to come, freely told and forever shared. 5. Dawn on the valley. As sunrise crowned the hills, the blue mist finally lifted. Children danced spirals through wildflowers. Every home, every heart rang with the dawn's promise. Visitors brought stories from distant mountains, every new tale weaving the spiral tighter and farther than it had ever reached. Mrs. Pike, smiling, handed the last copper ring to a child she'd never met, whispering, "Now you are a keeper. May every story you invent carry us all into legend." Days after the vault's reopening, the valley thrummed with possibility. Travelers arrived, drawn by tales of the spiral's return, bearing new stories, unusual tokens, and wild questions. Some sought healing, some forgiveness, some simply to witness the legend as it unfolded. Jacob walked the length of Black Hollow, visiting old friends and new keepers. He passed from porch to pasture, weaving every new echo into the valley's fabric, each voice, each hope, each tale another turning of the spiral. Lavinia collected blue petals from spiral-shaped gardens, crafting wreaths for every council gathering. Mercy's bone dominoes became coveted gifts. It was said that if you slept with one beneath your pillow, your dreams would be gentle, and every loss would teach you a lesson worth sharing. Children invented spiral races, tracing labyrinths through meadows, trading tokens for secrets and songs. Gray hosted the Spiral Challenge in the high woods, seeking bravest hearts and wildest inventors. Each challenger had to face the mountain's riddles in turn, offering hope, memory, or invention as their price. Some left the spiral with new names, some returned with laughter or tears, all changed in kindness. Mrs. Pike, honored by all, finally told her full story by lantern light, a tale of curses survived, forgiveness found, and the strength to invent love, even when hope seemed lost. The council made her the keeper of dawn, charging her with teaching every new arrival what it meant to turn sorrow into a shield. Fairbanks, moved by Black Hollow's dedication, pledged to write a book not just about the spiral's history, but about the valley's future. Stories here are alive, as fierce and gentle as any mountain, and they carry every keeper's echo toward the world's next legend. On the final night of the return, the valley huddled around the spiral altar. Jacob placed the warm heartstone at its center, blessing both ancestors and future inventors. The mountain rumbled, peaceful and satisfied. Children sang spiral anthems as lanterns soared skyward. The dawn after the spiral's return saw Black Hollow more united and beautiful than ever. Every story, every kindness, every echo had become a gift. The spiral, remade through invention and forgiveness, would guard the valley so long as there was one keeper brave enough to tell the legend anew. Spring became summer, and the valley continued to transform. Outsiders arrived in greater numbers. Scientists, storytellers, travelers, even those who'd long denied the spiral's legend. They were greeted by the rituals of the Spiral Society and the Spiral Challenge, welcomed around fires and altars, taught the pattern of bread and echo games, and blue lantern vigils. Jacob and Lavinia served as guides, revealing not just old codes, but new traditions. Their own family grew, children who traced spirals in chalk, invented challenges for friends and strangers, and learned that kindness could be both memory and shield. Mercy's dominoes became keepsakes, passed on with stories of forgiveness and bravery, living tokens in a valley where every hope was cherished. Gray's spiral wildflowers flourished through the meadows. Families marked paths to the vault with ribbons, singing at every crossroads, assuring each echo its place in the harmony of legend. Fairbanks' Outsider's book found eager readers across counties. Curious children came from distant towns, hoping to earn a keeper's token, to hear Mrs. Pike's story, or to join the spiral's next dance. New arrivals brought strange customs, which were gently spun into the valley's myth. Black Hollow's spiral became not just a shield, but a home for every story daring to hope. On the anniversary of the spiral's return, the valley held a day of legend. All gathered at the altar, placing new inventions, letters, maps, spiral-shaped loaves, and lanterns as gifts to the mountain and the future. Jacob led the telling of the Echo Blessing, a tale that had grown with every passing season, each keeper making it richer and braver. As summer's dusk faded, Lavinia whispered to Jacob, "The spiral tests us, but it also trusts us. Our stories make tomorrow, so let's invent wisely, together." The spiral, remade by invention, became the valley's living heart. Black Hollow vowed to outlast every echo, every fearful curse, and every wild hope born in myth. As seasons passed, Black Hollow's reputation, as the valley of the living spiral, grew and blended with the world beyond the mountain. Outsiders arrived not in search of curses or riches, but to learn the art of forgivers, how sorrow became song, how wounds could birth legends, how kindness was both shield and seed. Jacob and Lavinia grew old among their own inventions. Their children, now young adults, led echo expeditions across fields and streams, mapping new spirals in wildflower and story, documenting hope, loss, and invention as treasures for future keepers. Mercy's dominoes, now family heirlooms, hung in windows and altars from Black Hollow to far distant hills. Mrs. Pike's teachings spread, with children playing her spiral rhythm games at every vigil. Fairbanks' book became myth and manual, guiding strangers to build spiral dances and blue lantern feasts in lands where the mountain echoed with fresh hope. The Spiral Society gathered for one last festival, the Lantern's Farewell. Jacob recited the valley's full epic, from war to echo, kindness to pact. Lanterns soared, blue and gold, to the clouds. For the first time, children invented stories for stars, promising to invent forgiveness into legend wherever the spiral's shadow fell. That night, the vault closed softly and did not reopen. Black Hollow was at peace, its wounds healed through memory and myth, its future safe in the hope of its youngest keepers. As dawn crested the ridge, Jacob rested in the wildflowers, Lavinia beside him, their hands joined around a final bone domino. Mercy stood at the boundary, smiling with gentle pride. Gray, leading the children onward, called, "When the next spiral returns, may it find us brave, gentle, and unafraid." And as the new sun touched Black Hollow, every echo sang in harmony. The spiral does not end, but goes where kindness dares to invent tomorrow. The legend, the valley, and its keepers are ready for every new story, every echo, and every hope yet to be born.